Hi guys! So obviously this week we are talking about advertising and consumer culture in our videos. I am wearing my glasses today because we're going to be getting very serious over here. Um, no, actually I just wear contacts usually, so I apologize for the glare. I know there will be some glare off of my glasses. Um, there's nothing I can do because I need him to read my notes. Otherwise, I would take them off for you guys. So I actually read, long story short, I read two different chapters in the fourth part of our textbook, Sex, Lies, and Advertising by Gloria Steinem, because I love her, and Super Sexualize Me, Advertising, and The Midriff by Rosalind Gill. And I'll actually be talking about Super Sexualize Me by Rosalind Gill in this video. I could have discussed either essays. I recommend reading both essays if you're interested in women's rights and sexuality in advertising and over-sexuality in advertising, which is what Rosalind Gill's essay is about. They're both great essays. I'm just going to be discussing the one about the midriff in this video. Okay, so the first question, do I agree with the main points of her essay? Yes, I do. I can't say that I disagree with this essay. I agree with its main points. What I enjoyed about it is that this is a topic I've been studying for different school classes since high school. We don't need to say how many years, but suffice it to say a while. And she made some points that I had never put together before and that I had never heard before about sexuality in media. And so for that, I appreciated this, and I'll touch on what those points are in a second here. Do I agree or disagree? I agree, I would say about 80% with this article on everything that she says. There's really nothing that I disagree with. If you've read the essay, it's about 4 or 5 pages. Essentially, the only things that seem dated were the fact that it was written about 7 years ago, and so our society has changed slightly in that she focuses mainly on the midriff, which is a coin term, but is of course a real term. Most of us know what it is. If you don't, it's the stomach, essentially. It's women showing their bare stomach from their, as she describes in the essay, pelvic bone up to their lower rib cage. So the stomach, essentially. Being shown by crop tops as we know them. She discusses it and its impact on society. A big reason why I'm discussing this essay in my video is that I was a teenager in the 2000s, the early 2000s, so I know exactly what a midriff is, excuse me. I've heard that word a million times. I could tell you exactly what it was before I read this article. I could tell you exactly what its main points were going to be before I even read it. Except for the big point that she made that I really enjoyed, not enjoyed, but I really found insightful, is that she makes a point of stating in the essay that women are being advertised this way to appeal to men, but they're also being asked to enjoy it. The midriff is meant to be a post-feminist expression of this is my body, I can do with it what I want, and women are being asked to enjoy the fact that they're essentially, putting their bodies on display for men. And they're being asked to look at it as empowering. Whether or not it's empowering, of course, is the main topic of this essay and is up for generalized debate. However, she does make some fantastic points. I have a quote in here somewhere. On page 257, quote, "Women are presented not as seeking men's approval, but as pleasing themselves. In doing so, they just happen to win men's admiration, ... And of course, it's that last part that brings up the entire issue, is the whole, in doing so, if it so happens to turn on a man, then that's just gravy. type, we all know that a midriff isn't comfortable, it isn't, anything that makes a woman feel better about her education or makes her feel more comfortable in a day-to-day work environment, etc., etc. Bringing in the, statement of this is a lot of heterosexual, sometimes white, although it is all races, women doing this to attract the attention of men, um, and not just for themselves, is where the line is blurred. Even though they are making the choice to do this, no one is forcing them to show their midriffs, for the most part. And so that was a good quote for me to hit on before I move on to soaps here. Is it accurate or insightful, the essay? Yes, it is. I would say that it is insightful. I'm going to get into a few more details about what she talks about. How the only thing I really found wrong with it was that she didn't provide enough examples. She really didn't provide too many. She didn't drop names, and she didn't drop company names, advertisers' names. She only dropped one pop star name, which was Madonna, as being the first pop singer to show her midriff. I was expecting more pop singers' names. Again, I grew up as a teenager. I was a child in the 90s. I was a teenager in the 2000s. And the Britney Spears midriff was practically its own empire. I mean, it really was everywhere from, the years 1999 to about 2003, 2004. It was everywhere you looked. And for better or worse, it didn't even get a mention in this article, despite the fact that I should have mentioned this. This was written in 2009. I was in high school at the time, and so I was expecting there to be more references to famous midriffs when I was a teenager and how they impacted society. Instead, she spoke more broadly, which, of course, she wasn't addressing the soaps. Soaps were not a part of this essay, and so I can't hold it against her that she didn't address them all. Moving on to soaps, she actually does cover all of the SOAPSs except for the first one, Speaker. And again, the reason that she doesn't is that she doesn't talk much about herself. She doesn't talk much about her history with the midriff. And again, she doesn't name drop that often, and she doesn't list companies that have used the midriff in advertising, and she doesn't list celebrities who have used it to further their career. What I will say is, in reading the Gloria Steinem essay, it's about her time as a higher up at the magazine Miss, spelled capital M, lowercase s, period. The magazine Miss, many of you I'm sure have heard of it. And that article is almost nothing but the first S in soaps, which is Speaker. So if you're really looking for good examples of the first S in soaps, I would check out Gloria's article, Sex, Lies, and Advertising, about her time at Miss, because it really is nothing but name dropping good companies, bad companies, sexist companies, and how it affected her being a higher up at this magazine in the 1990s. That article was written in 1990. So does this author cover the how question, the how do voice, tone, etc. affect the advertisements? She does a little. Again, she just doesn't name drop. It's more as a generalized philosophy. But she does cover the big how question. Does she cover the why question? Yes, much better than she covers the how question. The why question being what hegemonic messages are portrayed through this advertisement. Of course, I already, with the quote, mentioned that it's women attempting, young women usually. She mentions that it's usually, 18 to 30-year-olds who show the midriff, but of course younger than 18 and over 31 do as well. Plenty examples of that she could have mentioned that I mentioned earlier, but she didn't. But she did touch on subtext and what it says about our culture. She touched on how it's pretty much not as liberating as it seems, though it is, it is more just for the men's pleasure as far as who the audience is in the advertisements using midriffs. And she does end on a good quote that I'd like to read. This quote I'm about to read really sums up the article in that it's much more generalized and doesn't list any specific examples. It's a long one, but it's on page 260, and she says, there's no good place to jump in, so I'll just start with, quote, "To contest this, there are three fronts on which feminists must engage. First, to articulate a language and culture politics of resistance to midriff advertising, preferably one that is funny, feisty, sex-positive, and inclusive. Second, to rethink agency and choice in more sophisticated terms than reject the existing dualisms, and finally, to push for or create more diverse representations of gender and sexuality." I agree with that wholly. It was, a great way to end the article. I especially agree with the first part, that a great way to combat this would be to poke fun at the midriff, which many people have done. I myself did it in the 2000s as showing my midriff as a boy, and people would say, oh, well, you can't do that, you're a boy. And I would say, well, why can't I? Or poking fun of it or making a statement. I'd really love to see an advertisement where a female in a wheelchair has her midriff exposed, because that has never been done, and yet should be viewed as completely acceptable as Britney Spears or Christina Aguilera showing their midriff, yet it's not. So sorry, I've been talking very fast because I knew that I would make this a very long video. I didn't get into the exact soaps of this article because I could have touched on either the author herself and the article itself, or I could have touched more on midriffs as a whole, because again, it is a product of my generation. So I tried just to touch on the basics of it. Long story short, do I agree with her article? Yes, I do. It is intelligent. I recommend giving it a read, as well as giving Gloria Steinem's a read, which is completely different. It's much more about advertising to women, the company's side of the story. And so that concludes this video on the fourth section of our textbook. I know we're starting Project 2, and I'm really glad I read these two essays because they were a great jumping off point for Project 2, and I haven't read my blog yet, but I know for this week, but I know that these articles will come in handy for that. So I look forward to watching your videos this week especially, and reading your blogs, because I want to see more examples of this. But anyways, I'm going to sign off now, so I will talk to you guys and watch your videos later. Thanks.